The first thing I wanted to ask you about was one of the most immediately striking things about Lucas is the physical difference between him and the other men in the community. The other men seem to hold themselves and dressed really differently to him. They're a lot more earthy and visceral. And Lucas was obviously very definitely one of them in the past. But why did you decide to make his character so physically different?
Well, this guy is just simply too good looking. And I actually wrote this part for Robert De Niro as a young version of Robert De Niro in Deer Hunter. Normally I write for specific actors, but it's not possible with Mads because he's not going to attach anything without a script. So when Mads was attached to the project, the character was more sort of a independent, strong, working class hero, man of few words. And I looked at that Mads, the stallion of a human being, and I thought, well, let's try to change that a little bit. And together with Mads, we developed a much more soft, humble, castrated, Scandinavian human being of a kind. And that gave us the possibility of creating, I think, a journey from a very civilized, almost Christian person into a less civilized person, headbutting people at the supermarket and stuff. I don't know if I answered your question, but he did look different because I wanted him softer.
And in terms of the costume, etc., that you chose for him and also for the other men in the community, were you very clear about what you wanted them to look like?
Not really. I'm not so clear about costumes. It's sort of a very emotional, fumbling debate going on. But we wanted, of course, to create togetherness and the sense of a village that had existed before the film crew arrived. I always want to throw messages to the past so that you feel that this is a real life going on. They have a past, they have dreams of the future, they have things they hide, and they have a thing going on together, which is all sort of around the film, if you understand. So, in that sense, they had to look a little bit similar, but still they had to stand out as characters, I guess.
The film came about because a long while ago you were given some papers by a psychologist who was asking you to look at the other side of child abuse. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about why you decided that the time was right to make this film and this story now.
Well, it was a bit of an accident. He knocked my door back in '99, and I'd just done the film Festen, which sort of is the antithesis to this movie. And he said, "So you did Festen?" I said, "Yeah." "So you have to do this film as well?" Which at that time I heard every day at the supermarket, and so I shelved it and I didn't read it. Then 8 years later, I needed a psychiatrist myself badly, and I had to read it because out of politeness for meeting him, and there it was. And I was like, at that time, I guess also more ready to dive into this area of life again. Having done Festen back in '98, I think, needed a break from this kind of topic.
And how did he respond when you said, actually, after all this time, I think I'm going to do it now?
Oh, he was very enthusiastic about that.
And did he stay on as a consultant?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, excellent.
But he's quite expensive. So we held it to...
You're not seeing him privately anymore?
It's a per hour kind of thing.
Yeah, fair enough. So you co-wrote this with Tobias Lindholm, and what you said about the way that you work together is that you're like a two-rider bike team when you're working on a project, which for me seemed quite an unusual analogy. Could you tell us a little bit about how you work together?
Let me first introduce Tobias Lindholm. He's got a film here, right?
Yeah, A Hijacking, playing next week.
Wonderful film. You have to see it. It's really good. And unfortunately, he's becoming a very, very fantastic director as well. So He won't have as much time. We're writing another film together, so that's good. He and I work a lot on the outline, talking about the story, turning all the pages back and forth, and trying different possibilities. And then at a certain point, we start writing. And also, as you said, as a bicycle team, he writes 10 pages and sends it back to me, and I rewrite them, or the other way around. And we sort of exchange who's in front, so that when you're in front, the first writer, it's without that big responsibility. You can just write without looking back, because the other one is going to catch it and rewrite it. And we go back and forth like that, and it works wonderfully. Well, in a way, this is a fairy tale kind of story of loss of innocence. It's a group of warm, naked people in togetherness, jumping into a lake. And then there's this drop of evil coming into the society, and it spreads like a virus. And if it was in a village, I wouldn't be able to control it dramatically, or in a larger city, I'm sorry. But many of those cases do happen in smaller societies, I have to say. I guess there is. I think I'm coming from one of the whitest countries on earth. It's like a little shire of very friendly people, hobbits. But they're very stern when it comes to the point. And they're fearful of things coming from outside, and fearful of conflicts. And we do have our troubles with that in Denmark. We do have a lot of debate about that. We do know where we were during the war. We do learn about that at school. And we do feel shameful about it as well. This film was not meant to be an allegory of back then. But of course it's rooted in our country, as in many other small European countries. Well, we basically told her everything. There's in this film a debate on how to treat children. I feel that our society is slightly victimizing children, overprotecting. When I was a child back in the 70s, I grew up in a hippie commune amongst genitals and happy people. And there was no misuse. There was purity of some kind. I could sit on my teacher's lap, and he could hold me if I was crying. Those days are gone, for good reasons. I know that we have a lot of kids suffering from physical assault, but we have to also look at what we lost from back then. There's a huge overprotection, I think. Listen, I went to private school, a communist private school, okay? And in third grade, we say, we want a sexual lesson, right? And the teacher's half pissed, gets up and takes his trousers off. Fine, and he shows, this is boom, this is boom. And that's how it was. Today he would have been 15 years in prison. And of course, I'm not trying to introduce that to the British school system. No. But I had that discussion going on in my mind. In my daughter's kindergarten, they couldn't wear gloves with a cord, because they could get strangled in the cord. And I understand that. But I also feel that you can't protect yourself from life. So anyway, we had all these discussions also with her parents. And we ended up telling her what it was about, and she didn't care. She just wanted to do ping pong in the break and say, what am I supposed to do? And that was it. It was so simple, and there was no harm done. So we talked a lot. We talked about lying. We talked about, why is this guy angry with you? So that she knew, so that she was not just violated by some crazy film crew. So she understood, and then she did her ping pong, and that was it. And she was just brilliant. And it was intimidating for the other actors, because both the dog and her was Spot on. It was like bark and woo, and bark twice, woo, woo, and it goes, and it's that simple. Well, first of all, the cases that I drew from were not Danish. I'm not going to say where they're from, for legal reasons. But they were not Danish. But we had similar cases in Denmark. And it's very interesting, by the way, that the fantasies of the kids look alike in the different countries. It's all about basements, which is kind of interesting. The bad practice, as I told earlier, this bad practice you're referring to is, of course, irrational behavior that comes out of fear and that I need for the drama, obviously. If they all reacted like you would have done, the film would have been very short, I'm sure. But I'm afraid this is happening all the time, and especially happened a lot of times in the 90s. The reason that the interrogator in this film has no title, he's not a policeman, he's not a psychiatrist, he's not working at the kindergarten, is that I don't want to point fingers at anyone in this system. Everybody's drastically trying to improve, but these things happen all the time anyway. And it happens between parents and children. If you ask as a parent the same question three or four times to a child, you're implanting something as a virus, and all these things happen all the time. So I thought of trying to make an anonymous sort of authority, and then I gave him a transcript of a real police interrogation.